Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, September 19th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you on this episode. We dig into the Guardians and their legitimate chance of getting into the playoffs and what that means compared to other teams historically that have been chasing in September. We've got some interesting performances we're going to dig into. Sandy Alcantara looks like himself again. It's kind of nice to see. We'll explain why that might be the case. Got a mailbag question that ties in very nicely to that as far as peaks following Tommy John surgery. A couple other mailbag questions. And the final weekend waiver preview of the 2025 season. You know, we're there. This is the last weekly fab run coming up on Sunday. I am not at all sad to see it go. I think
it's such a slog.
I think 26 weeks of fab is actually enough for me. Like, that is an adequate number.
Maybe a little bit too much. Can we do like bi-weekly? No, that's wrong. Bi-weekly means like twice a week. I mean, what does bi-weekly mean? I know it's something that I mess up all the time.
Bi-monthly would be twice a month.
Yes.
Bi-weekly would be twice a
fab?
week.
That'd be interesting.
I wouldn't mind it if you made the rosters bigger, so you have a little more in terms of injury coverage.
Bench. Yeah.
Would you have to have a cap on the number of pitchers rostered if you did that, just to make sure there's pitching in the pool? You can make the bench bigger for hitters and everything, but you say, okay, well, we went from a 7-player bench to a 10-player bench,
and now
only
you don't want everybody
4 could be
being
pitchers.
Like, nine players on my bench are pitchers, and one's utility guy.
I think that would have some negative consequences on gameplay that we have not fully thought through, so it's probably going to stay the way it is. But a conversation worth having in some detail at some point. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, you can do that with the link in the show description, especially with the playoffs around the corner. I think the game chats will change quite a bit. They'll be very focused on each game happening in the postseason. Had that going last year, so that'll be the plan again this season as well. Let's get to some baseball news you should know. We're going to start in Southern Ohio, or at least with the team in Southern Ohio. Hunter Greene keeping the Reds wildcard hopes alive with a complete game shutout against the Cubs, part of a 4-game series. It's going to matter a lot for Cincinnati. Cubs, of course, as we mentioned yesterday, already clinched their playoff spot, but Hunter Greene's doing stuff, that makes me believe, and I think we said this earlier in the year before his injury when we talked to C. Trent Rosecrans back in about May. He's got all the tools to be a Cy Young winner. And I think he can do it even in a season where he doesn't get above average luck on homers. If you look at the ratios he has put up this season, a sub-3 ERA, a sub-1 whip, he's doing it with what you'd say is a pretty normal home run rate for pitching half his games at Great American Ballpark. You can run a 30+% K percentage, and this year he's cut the walk rate to 6%. That's the big skills difference. That's what pushed that whip down to that .92 mark that we see. It's just a question of avoiding injuries for an entire season. If he can do that, I think Hunter Greene will get Cy Young votes and possibly even win that award at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think the splitter has been a good thing for him late in games because he's, so fastball dominant early, then he kind of goes to the slider, and whenever he sees anybody kind of sitting slider, he kind of goes to the splitter. So, I didn't think that would be a great thing for him because it's not really a strike throwing pitch, but it has, I think, allowed him to not try and be so fine with the fastball and slider. So he can kind of throw everything towards the middle. And, since it's 99 to 102, he's got the most 100-mile-an-hour pitches by any starter this year. It's hard to time everything. If you look at Oopsie projections, they use Stuff Plus, and the Stuff Plus affects the batting average on balls in play, the home run rate, and it looks like the strand rate a lot. And so Oopsie gives him one of the better home run rates projected future, the second best BABIP projection, and the best strand rate projection. And that comes out to a 3.2 ERA. That's true talent. Mm-hmm. So anytime you win a Cy Young, I think I'm not going to say lucky, but like you end up on the better side of your true talent. But if he's already a true talent 3.2 ERA guy with, a 31% strikeout rate, it doesn't take too much to end up with some hardware.
Yeah, and I think there's a stat that continues to occupy a larger part of my brain when it comes to pitching analysis that I like to look at. Zone contact percentage. I love looking at the zone contact percentage leaderboard. Who can throw pitches in the zone and still not yield as much contact as their peers, right? Tarek Skubal, once again this season, number 1. I lowered the threshold to 100 innings to get Hunter Greene to show up. The leaderboard this year is Skubal at 1, Dylan Cease at 2, and Hunter Greene at 3. They're the only 3 pitchers under 80%. Zach Wheeler at 80% exactly. Paul Skeens is 5th at 80.1%. I love that because it's like, hey, it's a strike if you don't swing, and you're not even going to hit it as much as you could hit other stuff if you do. It's to me kind of a good measure of how filthy you could actually be. Interesting about Dylan Cease being up there is when you look at overall zone percentage, Skubal's at 55.5%, Green's at 56.8%, Dylan Cease 46.4%. You don't allow a lot of contact in the zone. You're just not in the zone enough, and I think that's what's going wrong for Dylan Cease. But I think you frequently see great pitchers at and around the top of that zone contact percentage leaderboard.
Yeah, I'm going to bet on Dylan Cease again next year. At least it'll be cheaper.
Yep. You'll get a discount. It's maybe not as much of a discount as you'd like, 'cause I think you've got a lot of other folks out there that believe he can do it since he's already put that down on the page before. Trevor Rogers is 8th, by the way, in zone contact percentage, a big part of our conversation on our Thursday episode this week. I was going to say, I could read off these names and you can just tell me when I get to a pitcher that you're not as enthusiastic about, but I think I know who it is. It's a guy who's injured right now. Chris Bubich is 11th on that list. I think that's like the first name I would say. You'd be like, Chris Bubich is kind of okay.
It's the first name on the list.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between those two guys in terms of reasonable
lefties.
expectations going forward. Like lefties without overpowering velo, but pretty good command and secondaries. I think it works.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about there. And then, on Cincinnati also as well, you have, Brady Singer outperforming, expectations, I think. And, part of it, I think, is that park effects are not uniform for everyone. So it's possible that something about his spray chart, something about the fly balls he allows, something about the contact that he allows was not going to lead to a big home run rate. But I would also posit that with a 419 Sierra and a right around, actually I think below average K-BB, that Singer is really in a group of players, and I kind of want to put Rogers in this group of just like average guys that can have great seasons. And season to season, I think the toggle that I need to get right is season to season. You wouldn't necessarily bet on them always to repeat, especially if they've just had a great season, But in season, Nick Pollock talks about this a lot, is, if they are going well and they are a veteran and they are in this class of decent pitchers, maybe you should just buy in quicker. Despite what the stuff says or the K-BB or whatever.
I think Brady Singer is a little underrated right now. There was a point in the first half where he was rolling, then he hit a bumpy patch where the regression monster, as it's often referred to, got him. But the second half has been great. He's one of 11 pitchers that's been worth $20 or more so far in the second half from the Fangraphs Player Rater. The way he's doing it's a little weird. I mean, he's got a negative run value on the sinker and the four-seamer. The only fastball with a positive run value is the cutter. He throws that the least, right? So it's just kind of a, how sustainable is this approach, right? It's not a ton of swinging strikes. It's kind of an average-ish strikeout rate. I think what's interesting is that the walk rate has ticked up for Brady Singer this year to 8.7%, and the home run rate has come down just a little bit. So maybe that's adjusting to his ballpark, getting out of Kansas City where homers get suppressed, going to Cincinnati where homers get boosted. He's willing to concede the walk a little more often, and that sort of helped him keep those ratios at a very similar level. But it's easy to underrate a player like this. I think it's kind of like a Jose Barrios sort of profile right now from Brady Singer.
Yeah, I guess, and there is a group of these that, what's really hard when you're doing the in-between season rankings is comparing those guys to really exciting prospects or something. Like compare, like how are you going to rank Jonah Tong versus Brady Singer next year? You know, like
Tong in front by a lot.
I know, but like, you know, I don't think that's like by projections. I don't know how far apart they will be. Maybe that's not the best answer either. But like, how about somebody that's like just a little bit harder to
Andrew
that
Painter
has more helium, huh? Peyton Tolley or.
I was thinking like Andrew Painter versus Brady Singer for next year, because I think we'll still be excited about Painter, even though this year didn't turn out the way we expected. But Singer is the type of pitcher that is typically undervalued in our game, because
I think it's also reasonable because like he had a 4.32 ERA in the first half in 100 innings. Like how valuable was that? And he probably got dropped in a lot of places. So, you know, there were people who drafted him, thought he was good and dropped him, and then didn't get that 310 in the second half, you know. And another thing that like Chris Bubich, I got a lot of crap for, you know, where I ranked him. And you know, he had a 3.52 ERA in the second half, 4.23 in June. Like there's second half, it was 7 innings. Sorry about that. But you know, after this lights out start, he was more of a 4 ERA guy. You know, he started out with a 2.25 ERA in March, a 0.5 ERA in May, and then he was a 4.2 and a 3 and a 4.0 guy the next 2 months, right? So, you know, it's kind of hard sometimes to capture these guys. It's a little bit lightning in a bottle. They generally pitch to like a sort of 4-ish ERA, and then sometimes they can string together 3-4 months of a 3 ERA, and we all think that something has changed. And I would posit that's just sort of the ups and downs. And sometimes if you have the shape that like a Bubich season has had, you ignore the 4 ERA months and you just remember the first parts. And because of the injury and the way that things are weighted, he's going to come out looking golden when, you know, he was basically a 4 ERA guy for half the season. So I don't know. I think that there's a big glob of pitchers, and I'm glad that you said that you'd had Tong way ahead of Singer, because that's how I rank. You know, I'm more excited about the guys who could be aces rather than these guys that are like all projected for around a 4 ERA. I'd rather, you know, what I need to do is have some of them, and that was like the Seth Lugo call a couple years ago, right? It was like, hey, this is a 4 ERA guy going to Kansas City. He's going really cheap. I think he'll be doing a little better than that. You know, so every year I need to have my yearly Seth Lugo, and one year it might be Brady Singer. He's also a free agent, so we don't know where he's going next year.
He's got 3 seasons out of the last 4 with a sub-4 ERA. The whip got up to 127 in one of those years, which gets into that line of that's not necessarily helping you as much anymore. But a 114 back in 2022, I don't know if he'll ever be able to do that again, short of landing in a very pitcher-friendly park where he can maybe push that walk rate back down. But even that 5.6% is an outlier for his career for his walk rate. So I don't think that's a true talent number either.
I just think about his arsenal. Like he throws 3 fastballs and a slider.
Right. 3 fastballs and a slider, and the fastballs aren't grading out particularly well.
I guess it's 3 fastballs and 2 results. Sliders. Yeah, but they're not very good fastballs. And yeah, the sliders, the models don't like, but they've been effective.
This type of pitcher can be a blind spot, though, because they do have value, and it's so easy to see him on a 12-team waiver wire and be like, ugh, I don't believe it. I don't believe. And it's like, nah, they're good enough. But 2-start weeks, streaming opportunities, they're a little more viable than I think I have often given them credit for as a wholesale group. As far as the Reds this weekend go, Lodolo versus Shota Imanaga, Littell versus Assad, and Andrew the Riddler Abbott is the new nickname I'm going with for Andrew Abbott against Jamison Tyon on Sunday. So those are the pitching matchups as they try and cling to their chances of sneaking into that final wildcard spot. They appear to be the team that will put the pressure on the Mets, at least for the next couple days. And on Monday, it'll probably be somebody else, because that's what every 3 days of baseball keeps doing to us at this point. We did learn that Clayton Kershaw will retire at the end of the 2025 season. He made that announcement on Thursday. I'm really not that surprised, because we've been playing this game for a few years. Injuries have piled up. Workloads have gone down as a result. I think everyone was sharing favorite Kershaw memories throughout the day on Thursday. Mine is Brandon Woodruff's home run off of him in the NLCS in 2018. I love it. Absolutely love it. My favorite.
Well, I feel like I've had to push back. There's like a famous baseball prospectus commenter who still thinks that Clayton Kershaw is not a Hall of Famer. Or he did for a long time. I wonder if he still does. I would like to check in with him. Because Kershaw's going to retire 20th all time in strikeouts, the 20th member of the 3,000 strikeout brigade, and only one other pitcher has ever won as many games as him and lost fewer than 100. So one of his legacies is not losing. And the other pitcher who did it was Al Spalding, who pitched in 1875 and threw 616 innings one season. So not really comparable. He also had like a 5-year career. Maybe these things are related. I don't know. Anyway, he also had an insane 2.54 ERA for his career that won't change much after one start. And that's the 18th best with more than 2,500 innings pitched. So just really great ERA. And I thought I would do this because I saw Tom Tango tweet that there is no such thing as the greatest regular season pitcher of all time. And that pitchers are what they are with the postseason included. So I said, okay, let's fold in that bad postseason ERA. His ERA goes all the way up to 2.66, and he would be in a virtual tie with old Hoss Radburn at 28th all time among 2,500 innings pitched guys. So, I mean, no matter how you slice it, top 30 ERA of all time, one of the best winning percentages of all time, the top 20 in strikeouts. So very obviously a Hall of Famer. And I don't even think the playoff thing is that much of an asterisk for me personally. He has some hardware. He has some good playoff starts. Did he struggle a little bit in playoffs? And did it, change over time? Was it for different reasons? Was it always home runs? I don't really care. I think he's one of the best pitchers of all time. And it was interesting to see somebody like Madison Bumgarner say he was the best pitcher of all time. So I think that one of the smartest things about this time that he's choosing to retire is that, he could have hung on and added some more counting numbers at 37 and how he's pitching right now. You'd think he'd be all right, but he would affect that career ERA because the peripherals aren't that great. He's had a 4.5 SIERA for 2 straight years. The strikeout rate is just going down every year. The velocity is just going down every year. And honestly, if you asked him, I bet you, and he was being honest, I bet you he says he hurts. Probably. His body hurts. It's been a lot of injuries.
Yeah, it's been a lot. He comes up in the same conversation as old Hoss Radborn. Who would have thought? Yeah, probably a lot in common, but yeah, it's interesting, man, because there's a chance he's in the bullpen in the playoffs. I don't think he starts a game for them in the playoffs unless a bunch of guys get hurt.
But I also
the skills have fallen off. But he's been in the bullpen in the playoffs on short rest before. Like he finished the game 7 of that same series in which Woodruff homered off him. He finished game 7 to clinch it for the Dodgers on 2 days rest.
Yeah, but I'd be nervous using him as a closer. Like
not as a closer, but like look at the state of their bullpen right now. I could see them deciding that he's their last guy in and just picking some spot to use.
I think he's on the playoff roster for me. Like if I'm running that team, he's my second lefty in the pen.
There you go.
Though actually
Alex Vesia, the number 1.
Third.
No, because of
Scott's a lefty. I forgot Scott's a lefty.
Scott's a lefty, yeah. Yeah, anytime the closer is the lefty, you're like, yeah.
It messes you up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And Vesia got the save on Thursday night because they're still looking for answers in that bullpen.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's Kopech, man. We were both looking at him. We were like, why is he so sweaty?
He just...
I bet you it was hot. It was hot. LA's hot.
Sure, it's hot. I texted you and I was like, he just doesn't look well. And I'm not trying to make a judgment of a person. Like maybe it's the beard is like very long at this. Like just tidy up the beard a little bit, you just look uncomfortable.
The command is pretty awful. I mean, he's always had pretty bad command, but I kept thinking he's going to hit somebody in the face with 98.
Yeah. They got into a mess and found their way out of it. It was close. They almost coughed up that game against the Giants on Thursday night. Did some digging earlier today. We were starting to wonder, like, if the Guardians make the playoffs, they wrestle their way into the AL wild card, or possibly come back and take the AL Central from the Tigers. The former mathematically about twice as likely as the latter, but both reasonably possible, I guess you'd say at this point. Like, how extreme is that in terms of comebacks? How big of a collapse would it be if it's the division, especially, right? That was the scenario that I had really, probably as early as July, I thought, well, the AL Central's over. Like, it's hard to declare a division over with 2+ months to go.
Well, the Tigers had a double-digit lead on the Guardians in the division to begin September, and that would be the biggest collapse of all time. Here are the other biggest collapses. The largest September division leads lost in the divisional era. Thanks to Elias and thanks to Jason Stark for passing this along. The 1995 Angels were in first place in their division and by 7.5 games and lost. They lost in a game 163 to Randy Johnson and the Mariners. Mark Lanston lost that game. That was the closest the Angels got to the playoffs between 1986 and 2002. So it's so very Angelian of them to be at the top of this list. But there's some other fun things on this list. 1978, the Boston Red Sox were ahead by 6.5 games and lost out. And they actually lost in a one-game playoff to the Yankees. But the interesting thing about that season was it really came to a head in a late year 4-game sweep in which the Yankees won 42-9 in that 4-game sweep combined. And it's called the Boston Massacre. So that's a little part of the Yankees-Red Sox lore that I had forgotten. And that's just a little asterisk there. They're number 2 on the list. The 2006 Tigers were coming off of the mat. 2003 Tigers were the previous loss record. That was the 119 loss team. There was a big Jim Leyland "We Stunk" tirade that set the team in motion, and they started winning a bunch. That was rookie Verlander with Kenny Rogers was on that team, I think, too. Joel Zumaya was in the pen. I went to games in Comerica that year. That was a lot of fun that year. But they lost the division, but it was in the wild card era, so they made it all the way to the World Series before they lost. And then 1969, the Cubs. I just find this interesting. That was the first year of divisional play, and the Cubs, the Mets insisted on, the Mets were going to be in the East no matter what. And the Cardinals insisted on being in the East because the Mets were in it. And the Mets were considered like a rising, they just wanted to be in that division. They thought the Mets were good and that'd be good for everything. So the Cubs were like, well, if the Cardinals are in the East, we have to be in the East. So that put all of them in the East. And that's why the Braves were in the West, which was a really weird thing that happened for a while. The Cubs ended up losing a 4.5 game lead on the Mets, who won the World Series that year. So that was also during a time when there was no wild card, so they didn't have a consolation prize. But 7.5 games is the record. And the Guardians had were behind double-digit games, so they would easily break that record. It's a lot. There's still a lot for them to do. It's 3.5 games. There's still 3.5 games to go. But there's that 3-game series between the Guardians and Tigers, which you kind of want to circle, especially when you think of things like the Boston Massacre. Now, I'm not calling for another situation like that. I doubt any team is going to outscore the other team 42-9. But it has happened before, and so therefore, I guess it could happen again.
Oh, my lizard brain is just waging war on me from the inside. I have no smooth transition in this case because the idea I had was just absolutely Just not
Well,
not
hey,
where we should go.
how about it? It gives us something to watch. It's a fun thing to watch. You gave us the Reds as a surging team in the NL, and the Guardians are happily giving us something to watch in the AL.
They are, and as we mentioned, they have a doubleheader this weekend in Minnesota. Got a 4-game series when everyone else is going to play 3, so that gives them a chance to knock one of those games off, kind of an extra bonus game, and then create that extra pressure for that early week series against the Tigers. I just want it to matter because I don't have a rooting interest in it. If you're a Tigers fan, you're like, no, I want the Twins to play spoiler and just put this thing as far out of reach as it can possibly be. Some other news you should know. Sandy Alcantara with his second straight 8K performance. Easy for me to say. Going back to the middle of August, Sandy Alcantara's last 7 starts have been at least 6 innings across the board, a 2.70 ERA, a .81 whip, and a 49-8 strikeout to walk ratio in 46 2/3 innings. Is he capital B back finally?
I think so. I mean, one thing you can tell is in those starts, he had, I think it was 7 straight starts of double-digit or 100-plus location plus and stuff plus. So the location plus coming online is really important. You can also look; it's the best stretch for his slider locations, and he's starting to use the slider again. So I think all of his pitches are back. The strikeout rate is up. And I think he's an awkward rank and an awkward pitcher to think about because I think in terms of real life quality, he is an ace. I think but it depends on your quality of ace and your number of aces you have. Like if you internally have, 5 aces, he's not an ace. If you internally have 15 aces, I think he's right there. If you think the definition of ace means best pitcher on a team, there should be about 30 of them, then he's definitely in, if you ask me. But there's for fantasy purposes, he's always had a slightly lower strikeout rate. So that diminishes his impact a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's happened even at his peak is it's been absurd workloads necessary to kind of pop that strikeout total at the level where he becomes a fantasy ace. And I think the downside that we have with any of the workhorses kind of comes through with the likes of a Brady Singer or a Jose Barrios, like we talked about earlier, is that they can put that negative ratio weight onto your roster in a bad year. We've lived that this year with Sandy Alcantara if you've had him active all season. I mean, imagine there's probably some shallow league people out there that cut him at some point. You play in an 8 or a 10 team mixed league, like the results you were getting for the first half of the year, you probably weren't going to ride that out. Shouldn't have, given the scope of those leagues. But I guess the question for a lot of people is going to be, can we even get back, let's just say the Cy Young season in 2022. That's the everything clicking year you described before. A 2.28 ERA, a .98 whip. That's just not happening again. Can the 319-107 happen again? Can he be a little bit like, I think he's kind of like another Logan Webb type for me when I'm bucketing pictures. Like pre-2025, Logan Webb was a lower strikeout rate workhorse whose home park made him feel like a very safe start half the time, and his overall skills, ability to induce grounders, and overall body of work was such that you're like, yeah, it's not necessarily capital A ace from a fantasy perspective, but a really good number 2 or someone I can pair with it's a higher strikeout rate starter or 2 to sort of get where I want to go with my overall combination of ratios. Can Sandy be that guy? Can he be 2021 Sandy again? Because if he's that guy, where that K rate's 23-24%, and the ratios are low 3s ERA, 1.10 whip, I think people are going to be really happy with him next year.
Yeah, and I think he's basically like he's going to be a cheaper Logan Webb or Fromber. He's in that group of pitchers. The one asterisk that I have, and it's really hard to do this in rankings, but if your settings are that you have an innings cap, it does reduce the value of these guys because that means per inning that you can use, you get fewer strikeouts. So I know, Auto News like that, Roto. There's a lot of leagues like that. And NFBC, however, is not like that. You can get as many innings as you can fit onto your roster over the season. And so that has been a slight lean for me because that's just the league that cost me the most and had to do the most preparation for. And so there's like a slight bias in that direction. But if you have a cap on your league, then these guys, you should probably dock these guys, 4 or 5 spots in my rankings.
It's a fair point. I think part of my interest in Sandy is going to be having some folks that are out after this year, keeping the price in check, and seeing that the K rate is 27% during this last stretch, right? It's not the 19 that you see on the Fangraphs page for the whole season. He's really turned that corner
like
again.
23 again. I think I'd project him at least for about league average with like a, 55, 60% ground ball rate, really low home run rate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in Ottoneu, he's only $7 on my roster right now, so he automatically gets bumped to $9. He might catch a couple bucks in arbitration at that price. I think he's an
That's
easy
a keeper
hold
for me.
Yeah, easy hold in that format, and it's something that I'll probably have a good bit of going into 2026.
But would I want to spend $25 in an auction to get him in Ottoneu? Maybe not.
Fair. Yeah. I think that's probably a good dividing line. There's a related question here. It comes from Lou Gleich in our Discord. Lou wants to know, what does the research say about production post Tommy John surgery? Is there a peak season? I'm thinking about guys like Robbie Ray and Jacob deGrom, who will have major inning spikes this year, 160 plus so far for deGrom, 140 plus so far for Ray. What does this suggest for next year? I think many of us got these guys cheap this year, and what do we think they'll cost next year? I mean, I think Sandy's recovery from TJ is another reminder that it does not come back quickly. And there was a good story, Charlotte Varnes, we had Matt Gelb on earlier this week. They both covered the Phillies for us. Charlotte wrote a great story about Andrew Painter. I mean, we thought Painter was going to be up in the second half of this year, tossing meaningful innings for the Phillies, and it just hasn't happened. And a lot of it comes back to command being the last thing that returns. Fastball command specifically for Painter has been a problem, and we see that a lot. And it's led us to start wondering with someone like Shane Bieber, whose command is even better than his stuff. Do those pitchers maybe have better outcomes? I don't know if we have a specific answer on that front yet. That's something that merits further explanation. But what do you see in the broader history of guys coming off of TJ and like getting back to their previous level or hitting a peak and then kind of falling again? Like, it's all kind of complicated by aging factors and how different some of these pitchers are in terms of the stuff they had pre and post surgery too.
There's never really been a research that I've seen that is focused on the peak versus when the surgery happened. I can summarize really quickly the research that we have seen. We've seen research that suggests there was a Tommy John honeymoon from Jeff Zimmerman. I think that I wouldn't go so far as to say it's been debunked, but I would say that might not still be true, that there's that honeymoon. There are people who come back and then have other types of injuries or, have Tommy John quickly or whatever. So I don't know that there's necessarily a honeymoon. But that was a piece of research that came out. Another one came out and said that that command doesn't come back as fast as stuff. That's something that we've cited a bunch. That was peer reviewed and in a journal. Another one in a journal said they don't actually mostly come back at all to the same level, but that used wins above replacement as the guidepost. So I would say that everybody who's had Tommy John recently is an innings risk still going forward. So I don't think there's any way that you can put a or B even health grade on anybody who's recently had Tommy John. You see a Luis Garcia story, but that does sort of lead to this question of if I don't take guys who've recently had Tommy John, I don't take guys who just had who are returning off of Tommy John, I don't take guys who I think are about to have Tommy John, who do I take? And so I think that there are reasonable places to take these risks. I think that I I kind of like the DeGrom situation. He came back and pitched late season, showed us the stuff was back. Then he gets a whole offseason to work on command. That's the sweet spot for me. Like, I prefer Bieber next year to, I guess, Bieber and Bradish next year to somebody who might be trying to come back. I don't know who that name is off the top of my head, but somebody might be trying to come back in March off of Tommy John. Or
yeah, I was trying to think of who's coming off of Tommy John specifically that we're not going to see, but their timeline is such that they're going to be ready to go for opening day.
Well, the Discord can help us on that.
Yeah, we'll dig into that group a bit more, but I've generally pushed toward that sort of planning as well, where I want to see some innings that are not terrible, know that it's building up and not rehabbing through the winter. I think having that indicator is really helpful. I do think that Tommy John honeymoon phase you referenced, I think that was all based on the idea that there was a 4-ish year window post TJ where you were less likely to break down again. Am I remembering that correctly? That was basically the crux of it, is like you had this.
It was like 400 innings in between.
400 innings. Okay, it was 400 innings, which again, a lot of times these guys are managed so carefully that stretches out over maybe 3 or possibly 4 seasons, depending on
Here's
the
a name. Garrett Cole. I think I would rather invest in Kyle Bradish and Shane Bieber than Garrett Cole.
Yeah, price matters. Is part of
but
this.
The price might be similar. People might be like, hey, Garrett Cole is great for a long time. And he used to be like a top 10 pitcher. So they might be comparable prices. They might be like back end top 40 pitchers or something, top 30.
I don't think Cole popped into my head right away because it was a nerve problem last year. But yeah, it was Tommy John surgery that included internal bracing in March of this year. So does That to me is like, oh, well, maybe he'll be ready for opening day because that'll be 12 and a half months. But if we use the 14-month outcome as the more likely outcome, then we're looking more at late May.
And then we
if
don't
the command's not there right away.
What if the command's not there right away and he sucks for the first, sucks, that's mean, but he's not as good for the first couple of months. So he does the Sandy Alcantara, then it won't have been worth the investment.
Right, because the expectations will come in very high because of Garrett Cole's track record, and understandably so. So I hope that answers at least some of Lou's question. I think it does. I think what tends to happen is once guys like DeGrom and Ray show that they can stay mostly healthy over a full season, the price goes pretty close back to pre-injury levels. It doesn't go all the way back because of aging, because the volume rarely comes all the way back up. I mean, Jacob DeGrom's not going to be a first-round pick in fantasy leagues ever again, right? Given his age and given that it was a second TJ, like there's no world in which that's going to happen or be an ADP we see next to him again. But compared to where he went this year, it's going to cost you more. And he wasn't cheap this year. I think the overall draft season ADP was around pick 50, and that went up as the season got closer, which it often does, right? Is there also something here, if you play draft and hold, if you draft during the winter, do you tend to take more gambles on the unknowns in these instances? If you, especially like a Bradish, or even the guys that have pitched, even if the guys that haven't pitched before, because if you get those good reports, like follow the ADPs for Sandy. Sandy had a good spring this year, so there was helium because he's like, hey, he's back. He looks really good, and he did. But it was a small number of innings in spring training. Do you want to take those shots now?
The earliest draft and holds, I actually have a couple Sandy shares when he was really cheap.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And then he priced himself out of where I wanted him. So my late draft and holds have none of him. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. I have a lot of Luis Garcia in my draft and holds because I got him as like my 10th starting pitcher, and I thought, all right, a second half guy to come when my other guys get injured, but that didn't work out. So I would just be careful. I don't have the answer. I know that there's people out there who will tell you that they have the answer and they know how to draft for injury risk, but I'm not going to tell you that. I don't think I have it all the way dialed in. I do think this one little thing about Tommy John, I would rather see them pitch first. It's how I got into the Luis Garcia mess.
The DeGrom price bump wasn't as sharp as I thought draft season overall compared to like main events at the end of March. He did have a main event ADP of 47. It made him the 17th pitcher. That includes a few relievers, probably about the 13th starter once you take those guys away. I don't know. Is he a top 10 pitcher going into next season?
He is on my TGFBI top 5 team. That staff went Crochet, Logan Webb, Jacob DeGrom.
Well, that worked.
Yeah, that worked.
That worked.
Maybe I should look at my draft order real quick. I think that might be interesting to people. I don't know. Maybe it's interesting to me real quick.
I would like to know what I did.
Yeah, draft results for this team. Okay, so in the first round, I took... Here we go. Saris. I had the 3rd pick, and I took Aaron Judge.
That also worked.
Well, remember back, there was a moment where I was debating Gunnar over Judge. I think maybe Gunnar.
I definitely remember that. You were like, I'm a little worried about Judge's health track record.
I think Gunnar got hurt before this or something, or maybe I just for this one was like, nah, screw it. I think maybe I got convinced by you guys. So my first pick was Judge. My second pick was, that can't be right. Austin Riley.
Maybe it was.
Yeah. Austin Riley was my second round pick. And Garrett Crochet was my 3rd round pick.
Yeah, there was concern about Crochet with the increased workload as a starter last year and possibly breaking down. And that should be pretty much a non-factor for a lot of people, right? I mean, Garrett Crochet, is he a first rounder?
Yeah, he's going to be real close.
Yeah, I think he's going to be right around that 1-2
early
turn,
second,
at the very least, for 15 teamers.
This was the team I took Ronald Acuna in the 4th.
Okay.
Jacob DeGrom in the 5th.
You just had I'm going to try and win this whole thing, and if it blows up in my face, it's going to be fine.
I guess in retrospect, I kind of drafted for the overall, huh? A little bit. I took some risks. Matt McClain in the 6th. That didn't work out. And Logan Webb fell to me in the 7th at 93.
Jeez. Okay.
So I didn't even plan on taking Logan Webb. I was just like, well, I can't let him drop further than this.
There you go. Another question that kind of connects also from Lou Gleick. Eury Pérez.
I'm 4th overall. Yeah, come on, root for me, baby.
I am rooting for you. I'm not just like trying to brush aside
no, it's okay. Nobody
your
cares
trip down memory lane.
I know.
This one, I think there's an answer from the previous question that helps us understand a little bit about this one. But the question is, will Eury Pérez ever be good enough on the road to be a must-start pitcher? This year he's given up 0 home runs at home and 11 on the road. Career splits are significant. Eury has a 2.27 ERA at home in 83 innings, a 5.07 on the road in 94 innings, and the hitters have a 764 OPS against him on the road. Lou points out, I know these aren't huge sample sizes, but it's concerning. This trend was there when he broke in 2023 and is carried over to this year. It makes me wonder about his long-term value if he ends up somewhere other than Miami. Working a little backwards, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think they view him as a really important part of any sort of success they're going to have in the immediate or short-term future even. It would take some kind of massive offer, and maybe it's possible, maybe some other team would do that, for the Marlins to move him. I don't think we've seen enough to believe that there's a major road problem here. But I wanted to ask you if you've seen anything in terms of actual pitch shapes and movements, because I remember last year during the playoffs, we had a Walker Buehler outing against the Mets at Citi Field. And you were talking about the air being different there. And the air is different in Miami. It's indoors, but it's, obviously low elevation and a lot of salt water nearby. And I wondered if maybe there is a little something there that's just being amplified within a small sample size, where I don't know if it's necessarily a Seattle level effect, but maybe it's an effect we should pay a little more attention to.
Well, I'm looking at his expected home run percentiles because it seems like you'd be talking about a home run problem. And the expected home run percentile for his four-seamer is 59, and where 100 is bad. That might be a little higher than you expected, right? I mean, that's context neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a little something about his four-seam that could be a little bit susceptible to homers. However, his breaking balls are the class of the league, and he has a wide mix. There's some location problems, but I think we're really early in his career. And that's what I would just say is it's too early to say this. That's my overall answer. Because, first of all, we have a 90-something inning rookie season where he's just learning what his stuff can do in the major leagues and how to get people out. Then we have Tommy John, and then we have him coming back, and his slider command this year has been incredibly inconsistent. He has a 45 location plus on a slider in one game. And in another game, his last game in Colorado, no less, a 117. So, and a 131 earlier. So, I mean, he is just coming back online. I think, the last three games, location plus is above average. That's the only 3 games in a row he's done that this season. You have right next to him Sandy Alcantara's story, and I think that he shares some of that story. So I do not have really that many things I am worried about with Eury Pérez next year. I am not worried that he'll necessarily become a home-only guy. And he's going to be pretty high in my ranks.
Looking at how they were pretty careful with his rehab, gave him the full duration and built him up very progressively. And you look at the total number of innings so far, I think for the year, he's at 108 2/3 with a couple of turns remaining. So he's probably going to clock in around 120 this year. I know we say it every time, the Verducci effect debunked, and yet still a bit of a guide for what teams frequently do. What are you putting in for your innings projection for Eury, given how young he is, given how careful they've been with him, and for good reason? Is he 160 for next year?
Now I was going to put the over under at like 149.
Yeah, so I might take the over on it, but I'm not super confident in that given all these factors.
And it will limit his rankings, because when I do my rankings, I use my innings pitched projections as an injury risk a proxy. And so I will have guys, my first 15 guys or so, my first 12 guys, I pretty much want them all to be 170 projection or more, just because that approximates an injury risk. And so I think he will end up as one of the more interesting guys in my second 15. But that's a really good ranking. Is that wrong? Is that too high? Would you like if I made him
16 to 30? Yeah.
19th, 20th, something like that. Like I don't know.
That's probably where I'm thinking about taking him in terms of order, because that this year, again, if you're looking at just a rough estimate, that's like pick 60 to 75 probably.
I think I'd be pretty excited, yeah.
Yeah, that treats him like a SP2, and you're probably just trying to pair a higher volume guy with him, ahead or behind him, or both. But
it's sort of where I got the Grom in that TGFBI situation, right? It's like, high risk but high reward.
Yeah, I mean, we're 177 and a third big league innings into his career, 26.8% K rate, better K rate upon arrival than he's posted this year. Still a really nice swinging strike rate, even with that dip to 12.9%. Doesn't get hit a ton in the zone, ticks that box for me. Does have that road homer problem, but I think that goes away with some experience. I'm pretty bullish on Eury for 2026 and beyond. I got him in a keeper league for $1 this year, and I am overjoyed because there is no inflation. There is no arbitration. I'm very happy with myself, and I'll stop talking about my teams now, too. We'll make a pact for the final 10 minutes. So I'm in. I think it's an interesting thing to be aware of, but I think we just have not seen enough to declare that a problem for Eury Pérez going forward. Thanks for those questions, Lou. We got one here from BitCloud. Trevor Story, is this the quietest amazing season we've seen in years? Not getting a lot of mentions anywhere. Even when we talk about the Red Sox, I feel like this falls on me. I make the show sheet. We work on that together, and it's hell. They traded Devers, and look at Roman Anthony, and Alex Bregman's going off in the first half. And Trevor Story, just age 32, finally healthy, a top 20 hitter from a fantasy perspective again. The real life value lags slightly behind that, but if you're a Red Sox fan, if you're in that front office, if you just care at all about that team for any reason, getting a 3.5 WAR season from Trevor Story this year probably seemed impossible throughout each of the last 2 seasons when he's been just overwhelmed by different injuries, right? So I do think he deserves some recognition, like a comeback player of the year sort of nod, just given the ailments that he has been slowed by throughout his time in Boston.
I think, again, it's the shape of the season thing, like with the Bubic in reverse. His first half for Trevor Story, 257, 298, 417, was not terrible, but it was actually maybe what people expected, right? So people kind of put him in the bin of like, well, that's what I expected. He's not bad. He's okay, but he's not great. And then the second half wasn't so blistering that people had to be like, oh my God, Trevor Story is like the best player in the second half. He hit 286, 341, 498. But if you put those two together, you're like, oh, wow, that was a really good season, because the first half wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And the second half was better than maybe I realized, And I think, sometimes just the shape of a season really affects our appraisal of a player. Now, I have seen some interesting analysis. He gets an opt-out, And
unless they give him, they can exercise a 2028 option on his deal to block the opt-out. Like, would the Red Sox rather give him that extra year?
I think they might let him go.
Can he beat what's left on his deal on the open market? It's only 2 years if they don't put that third year on there, 2028.
So it would be, 2 years on I want to see what it actually is.
I don't know if 25 front-loaded, back-loaded.
Yeah, 250. So he can beat 250.
I think he can beat 250. And what's the option? Is it 25 more?
Let me see here. The option is for 25 more. So maybe they actually do pick that up. I don't know. 375 to keep your closer, to keep your shortstop. It's not like the Devers. I was thinking, well, they wouldn't want to keep a bunch of long money on there. They just proved that with the Devers thing. But 375 is not that much to keep him around. I do think it's a little bit awkward because, Ceddan is not a great shortstop. So would you be playing David Hamilton or Marcelo Meyer at shortstop? Because that's going to happen probably over the course of this next 3 years. With Trevor Story.
It seems almost certain, right? A -6 DRS, -5 OAA, 8. We just don't see a lot of shortstops in their, mid-30s.
Yeah, the only ones we see usually are like Brandon Crawford, who was like the best defensive shortstop for a couple of years and aged well. And I don't think that is how you describe Story. So, 3 for 75 though for a guy who might have close to 4 wins this year. I actually think I've changed my mind. I think they will. I think they'll avoid that opt out.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I think it's a little more borderline, but he put together a season that would definitely make you think very carefully about it if you previously had dismissed the possibility. 31 for 32 on the base pass on top of the 25 homers. That homer total is
that's
best
a big one
in 2019.
Because, when we're looking at Trey Turner and stuff, we're talking about how just the presence of speed suggests that the athleticism isn't in full decline yet.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. I think that there are also what he's at the crux of, I think, a very interesting thing in terms of contract analysis, which is there are competing things that big market teams want. One, they would rather have high AAVs and short deals because they don't want to get locked into a bad situation for a long time. I think that's probably universal to all teams, but the big markets are more able to do this. We saw things like, what was it, Manny Ramirez for $250 million like a long time ago, and the Bauer deal in LA. Like, there's a lot of deals where the team is like, no, we love this. Bregman in Boston right now, right? They like that. But the opposing force is the Max Fried situation, where maybe you'd rather stretch somebody out and have them for lower AAV for luxury tax reasons. And then you throw in the coming CBA battle into the mix. And I think that makes all that super interesting. But 3-75, I think, becomes more interesting to a team like the Red Sox because it's short.
The shape of the season thing also applies to Bregman, right? That looked brilliant at one point, and now you're having the questions of like, is he going to exercise his opt-out, or is he going to choose to stay and maybe exercise that next year instead?
Oh, I did not expect that. Trevor Story has more wins above replacement than Alex Bregman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So he didn't have a great second half? Let's look at this. First half, 298, 380, 546 for Bregman. Woo, gangbusters, 151 WRC plus. Second half, 248, 332, still got that good OBP. 381 slugging, though, 95 WRC plus. All adds up to 3.5 win player at 31 years old. And the option on the table is to just keep a $33 million deal. I think he keeps it. Maybe he tries to negotiate an extension.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know how many extra years they'd want to commit at the moment, but they cleared out some future money with that Devers trade, so you should probably spend it somewhere. You are the Red Sox, and I wonder how much of the second half slide from Bregman is just the result of the quad strain. Maybe he came back from that a little quicker than expected. Still just hasn't got everything back in order.
Personally, he could bet, hey, maybe I won't strain my quad next year, So just give me that same deal again, and I'll try to put together, a better second half.
It's fair.
Have a better platform year,
Good question, though, BitCloud. Really nice season from Story. And I think relative to draft day cost, we were probably looking at Joey Ortiz versus Story and saying, we love Joey Ortiz. He's going to get to more power than ever. And Story's having a hard time staying healthy. I could see us having been on the wrong side of that call pretty easily, thinking about how we felt about Joey Ortiz in January and February of this year, especially. Let's get to our weekend waiver preview. The waiver previews get short this time of year because, well, it's just sort of filling individual needs. This is the last weekly roster tune-up of 2025 if you're in a league that runs Sunday Fab. So congratulations, you pretty much made it. We're almost there. You get your Sunday nights back real soon, unless you got some other commitments, which would be pretty typical of a lot of us. But where are you at for this weekend? What's catching your eye as you kind of look at the schedule and think about the unique nature of the final week when players start to get a little bit of rest? We get some of those, clinch hangover lineups and different things that wreak a little bit of havoc. Some kind of injury shutdown wave happens too as teams get mathematically eliminated. It's a funny week to try and say on Sunday what's going to make sense on Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I think it might behoove you to have an extra hitter on the bench. Make some real tight decisions with your pitching staff, especially in weekly leagues where, you may not, like, somebody may get shut down. Somebody may just sit for the hangover. There might be a lefty in a hangover lineup, and all of a sudden your guy is not playing that weekend at all or something. So I if you could have an extra hitter on the bench, I think it would just be a good idea. This going into this last week, you're not going to hold if you, for example, have a starter you don't like the matchup this week. But you have a full starting staff, like, replace that guy. Don't just have a dead weight on your roster for the last week. He might even be a really good pitcher. Say thank you and, via con Dios, But the other thing that I'm searching for are wins and steals. I find that you can make the most impact in the last week on those ones, probably because they have the smallest number of most of the counting stats. If you look across your runs, RBI, homers, and stuff, steals and wins are the ones where you're most likely that 2 or 3 could make a really big difference. So I'm looking at Weathers and Ashcraft as two starters, but of course your preamble, speaks to the fact that, are we sure that either of them makes their second start? I think Ashcraft may be less likely to, and it's at Cubs. Do you just take him because you like the first start and you don't even mind if he doesn't make the second start? or if you really need the second start, I agree. I think we were talking about this before. I think Weathers is probably more likely to make that second start. And then when I'm looking at steals, I looked at who's worst against the run. Miami, Houston, Atlanta, and Tampa are worst against the run. They've given up the most stolen bases. I looked through who they're facing. Brandon Marsh, less than 10% owned, has he just came up on the show with Gelb as being a really good second half guy. He may not steal a bunch of bases, but when you put them up against pitchers that give up a lot of stolen bases, somebody like Brandon Marsh could absolutely steal a base or two. Cedric Mullins has some good matchups this week. Nick York has not stolen a lot of bases in the major leagues. He's stolen some in the minors. He's widely available. And then I was surprised to find that Dylan Beavers is owned in less than 10% of leagues. What are we doing here? Dylan Beavers, I think, should be owned in almost every league. And the nice part about it is he has a good matchup this coming week for stolen bases. So you could get maybe 2 or even 3 stolen bases from Dylan Beavers in 1 week.
And maybe double up on the total he's got in the big leagues so far. 2 in 27 games, but 23 for 28 in 94 games at AAA this year. So it's in there. Really nice slash line from Dylan Beavers to start his big league career. He's hitting .277 with a .423 OBP and a .470 slug. Really making his case have a significant role for next year.
The only thing that hasn't impressed me is his defense in the outfield has been pretty poor. I don't know. I've seen, I don't know how many Baltimore games I've seen with him up, but I feel like he's made an error in each of them or just not made a play. So I don't know what that's about. He's really tall. He's lanky. Maybe he's headed towards DH or something. I don't know. But I would not think that he's going to be a great asset. He's not going to play center. He wouldn't play center for me, at least. And some of his batted ball stats are middling, but his plate approach is great. And I'm willing to take on, somebody who might have a 9% barrel rate next year and a 35% hard hit rate if they have really great plate skills. Reminds me a little bit of like a Jordan Westberg in terms of, he's going to have some power, some speed, a decent batting average, and have great plate approach and make the most out of the power he has.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. If you're looking for another shallow league option on the position player side, Parker Meadows has been back up high in the lineup against righties, playing a lot better since his latest return to the Tigers lineup. Last 11 games, just what he's been out there for. Got a 324, 405, 541, a couple of homers and a steal. Could touch all 5 categories potentially. So I think there's another name to consider if you're chasing speed only. We talked about the Twins being more aggressive on the base pass earlier this week. We are getting a lot of playing time from Austin Martin down the stretch. I think that's the category. It's kind of a steals and average play if you're looking for that. But categorical juice, if they're close enough together, that should work. Martin's rostered in about 5% of CBS leagues right now, so still some opportunities to add him as well. I know you're going to follow up with Chandler Romba, AJ Blubaugh. I just noticed that they've maxed him out at 4 innings pitched as his longest appearance in any opportunity he's had with them since late August.
That speaks to what Chandler was saying. I mean, they're a little nervous about something there.
Yeah, so if you see that matchup against the Angels and think strikeouts, like that's fine, but you have a very, very low probability of a win. He has to be extremely efficient to get through 5 innings, given how the 4 innings wasn't recently. He went 3 earlier this week and pitched really well, working in tandem. I believe that was with Colton Gordon, if my memory serves me correctly.
Another category that you can make some waves in the final week is saves. Mm-hmm. That's another one of the lower counting categories. And what's kind of cool about it is if you think you're safe in wins, this is a really great time to just, be like, I'm going to go with 5 relievers. I'm going to go with 6 relievers. They're more likely to pitch in the final week than maybe an older guy on a contender that just clinched, or a younger guy on a team that, like an Ashcraft that they're out of it and they'd rather make sure he's healthy next year, So I think that as much as I think that Tanner Scott is still where they want to go in LA and they want him to be the closer, I think even over Blake Treinen, who has been, I think, pretty shaky, I think that you can roster Alex Vesia, Tanner Scott, and Blake Treinen in 15-team leagues at least. If you have to pick one, I'm picking Scott. I think you can pick, Riley O'Brien. I think you can have him. I think my favorite are of the guys that I'm about to name are Tanner Scott and Brad Keller. I think just the recency bias or whatever it is, he's, a lot of times it might be recency bias. It's also who got the last shot. And it's, for me, Brad Keller ticks that box. Tanner Scott is paid the most and has the most upside. So those are my guys. But Riley O'Brien's probably my third favorite of these guys. After that, Kittredge, Treinen, and Vesia. I mean, take your pick. They might get saves. And so they'd be worth rostering if one save can make a big difference. But they are also all sort of in tandem situations.
Yeah. Yeah. The tandem closers, especially this late, as you said, if there's not a starter available, you're just trying to chase that category. You can tilt the roster and take advantage.
Sean Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
I put him up there with Keller and Scott. I think he's actually the closer.
Yeah, I think 3 of the last 4 saves have gone to him. Phil Maton got the other, but Armstrong's skills are a little more interesting to me than I expected. He's kind of looking more like the guy he was 2 years ago in Tampa Bay than the guy he was a year ago. So keep that in mind too if you're looking for some help on the saves front. Hopefully everyone can make the right adjustments for the final week. We'll get a chance to celebrate some league championships, some high finishes here in about 10 days. Looking forward to doing that. As I mentioned earlier, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Be sure to like this video if you made it all the way to the end. We really appreciate you. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.